everyone. I'm Michael Watson, the Employee Experience Advisor for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I'm also on the board of 1stGenYale. Welcome to our webinar tonight for everything you need to know about your internship before you start. The purpose of this session tonight is to help you learn some tips that will help you become more successful and get the most out of your internship this summer. So what I'd like to do is just give you an overview of what we're going to cover. First, we're going to have two panelists, and as you know, they are Josh Beal and Professor Matthew Spiegel from the Yale School of Organizational Management. And we're going to have a few questions for them. So during the session, as they answer my initial questions, feel free to either come on screen, ask a question, put your question in the chat. Again, this is your session. We want to make sure you get the most out of it. And then after those initial questions with the panelists are done, we're going to have a breakout session for about 10 minutes or so with alumni. And again, that gives you a chance in a smaller setting to ask your questions there as well. So again, the key thing is there's no question that you should be ashamed of. This is an opportunity to learn what you need to learn so you can really be more successful this summer, because this can be a pivotal experience and we want you to get the most out of it. So with that, I'd like to begin with Josh Beal. My first question. Josh Beal is a rising senior and with Ezra Style College. He's also a freshman counselor, or sorry, FROCO as they're called now. And so my first question here for you is, based upon your experience working, sorry, this is for Matthew Spiegel, start again. Based on your experience working with interns, what are the most important steps they should take during the first 2 weeks of their internship?
Well,
Professor Spiegel?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I would say first, obviously, you really have to know what it is you're supposed to be doing. So, and the second, and to go along with that is don't guess. Guessing is really bad. So what you want to do is if you have any questions you want to ask, and if you start working on something during the first 2 weeks and you're not 100% sure what you're doing, go and ask, because guessing is going to lead to trouble. The other thing is, sort of like the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. So if you're doing something and it's something and you change some routine in some way, you really should make sure that whatever you're doing isn't going to cause a minor disaster. I had a research assistant once destroy an entire database because they thought they had a really clever way of entering data, which wasn't that clever. We had to go back and start reconstructing it. So really, had this person just tested what they were doing off of the main database, right, a little database of their own, they would have discovered that it was a really bad idea. So if you think you have some clever new way to do something and you haven't checked to see if it's going to work, go check to make sure you're not going to do any damage when you do this. So, I don't want to say you shouldn't have any initiative and try to come up with a better way to do something. That's fine. But make sure it is, in fact, a better way to do something before you do it on something that could cause a disaster. So I'd say that those are the two most important things. One is don't guess. And the second is, have initiative, but be careful that you made sure that your initiative is actually a good one.
Thank you, Professor Spiegel. We'll have to remember not to blow something up or mess up a database.
It was not good.
So with that, we go to Josh. My question for you is, what action did you take during your internship that had the greatest positive impact on your internship experience last year? Because you were a 1stGenYale summer Bulldog, so tell us about that.
The biggest thing is just asking questions constantly. Going into my internship, I had no idea how psychology research was supposed to be conducted, so I asked. And I worked with Dr. Harper to read up on some papers, giving a bit of background on the project I was doing, and even just simple things about like, hey, what's the basic idea of what I should be doing on a day-to-day basis to be helpful for you? And is there anything else I can be doing? And from there, I started branching out and trying to learn on my own as well to further what I was doing and how much I was able to help. But it all starts with asking questions.
Excellent, thank you. Professor Spiegel, based upon your experience, what actions would you recommend students take or to avoid during their internship? You mentioned one of those. Anything else you would suggest that they avoid to have a bad experience during their internship?
Yeah, I think, if something does start to go wrong, or, you're having a problem, radio silence is a really bad solution to that too. And it's tempting like to clam up and hide if something's going off the rails, but you're just making it worse is what you're doing. So, on the other side of, don't guess and make sure you don't do any harm. The other thing is, if something does go wrong, you want to rectify this faster and sooner than later. Most people, well, you destroy a whole database, or less understanding, but if you don't get to that level of disaster, people are generally pretty understanding. And, and the earlier you get to it, the easier it is to fix. So I've had people, do something that I think they knew they weren't getting something done right, and then they just clam up, and then I get really mad, right? And the other thing I would say, don't make promises you can't keep or you don't end up keeping. So if you tell someone, I'll have this done by Friday, come hell or high water, it should be done by Friday. Like usually when I ask people, could you give me a timeline to do something? I don't really care if they say it'll be done Friday or next Tuesday. What I care about is that when they said it would be done, is that that's the day it is actually done, so that I know when to be able to use whatever it is they're doing. So that's the other thing I'd say. Don't make promises you're not going to keep or might not keep. If you do, and some horrible thing comes up, like, you have a death in the family, or there's your sister's eloping and they've asked you to come to the surprise wedding. Okay, let the faculty know that there's this emergency and that you're not going to get to whatever it is on time. But again, don't just let the deadline slip.
Great advice. Thank you very much. And Josh, looking back, what do you wish you had done differently during your internship that would be helpful to this year's internship, to this year's interns?
Honestly, the thing that I really wish I had done was coming in with a bit more preparation in terms of like knowing where to even start asking questions. And I think that had a lot to do with me just like not knowing a great deal about psychology research, but definitely like look into what you're doing and really try and engage with it at an academic level, because it helps establish that base so that when a question comes up, you know where to start looking for an answer. And so that when issues come up, and they will, I'm assuring you of this, they will come up, you'll be able to more easily understand what's happened and where you should turn to for advice.
Great, thank you. And now I turn this back to our students. Before we go into breakout sessions, sections, do you have any questions, either through the chat, or do you want to come on screen and ask a question before we go to the next stage of the program?
There are no questions yet in chat, but please feel free, students, to put something in or to come on screen.
I have Adele.
Hello, wait, can you
Abel,
hear me?
sorry. Yes, we can.
That's good. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this. I just wanted to ask, how do you recommend, managing like the new learning curve that you kind of face when you're doing a new internship? So like all the new information and understanding the new environment. What kind of advice do you have for, I guess, getting acquainted to your internship environment more smoothly, and like managing all the new information and like learning best in the new environment, outside of just asking questions?
So
go back to our panelists.
for me at least, a lot of that was establishing a very firm work-life balance. And as counterintuitive as it might seem, like making sure I was taking time for my life outside of the internship, like getting enough sleep, taking care of myself. But within the internship itself, it was just keeping that open line of communication and being open and honest about where you are with understanding things with your mentor. Because if your mentor doesn't know what you're clearly understanding and what things you're still struggling with, they can't offer advice on what might help you. And they can't really guide you through the process of learning those things if they don't know what's going on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, for sure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Abel. Anyone else with a question before we go to breakout? And Suzanne, you can let me know if there's anything in the chat.
No, nothing yet. I think
Okay.
students want to reserve their questions for the breakout.
Got it. All right, so what we're going to do then is we're going to go to the breakout sessions now, and you'll be divided into groups. And Suzanne, you can determine the number based upon the number of students versus the number of alumni volunteers. And you'll be there for approximately 10 minutes or so. And if one of you can be willing to be the spokesperson for your group, and we just want to know what takeaway you have from that discussion. And that way you can share it with the group as a whole. So with that, we're going to start breaking you into groups, and Annie will take care of that, I believe. And we'll go out to our students and just see what they learned from their discussion with alumni. So we can start with whichever one of you wants to start first. Abel?
No, I think the breakout groups were very productive. I thought some of the important things that I learned was that it's like very important to keep your word when it comes to what you say that you would do, and kind of just communicating with I guess your managers or people who you're working under to about any issues with completion and deadline issues. And also it's very important to kind of be thoughtful and mindful about what you're gaining from your internship. So such as like learning the skills and understanding what you're doing day in and day out so that you could transfer it beyond just that summer's work. So kind of seeing how you could use that to market yourself moving forward, and using that to add that to your resume, and creating new cover letters. And it's also important to I guess try to get as many people that you come in contact with, just getting their names and building your network from your internship. And I think this has been a recurring theme throughout all the different conversations, is that questions are very important. So just kind of understanding that asking questions is just an integral part of being an intern, someone who's not extremely aware about what you're going to be doing. So just asking, feeling comfortable to ask, just being comfortable, and also understanding that you will eventually be able to have the answers that people who are more knowledgeable about their roles. So if you ask someone a question and they kind of always have the answer, then you'll eventually be able to be in that position where it will just take time and experience and expertise. So, yeah.
Thank you. Very good synopsis. Any of the other interns have anything that they want to add to that?
I would just add to have confidence and ask questions and explore.
Very simple. Thank you very much. Corey, I believe?
He was a volunteer, but thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Are there any other, I can't tell who's who, unfortunately. Well, as we're in terms of the next section, I want to make sure, are there any other initial questions before we go to another question very quickly? Any questions from the interns? Abel? You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. If that was what I don't have any questions. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. What we thought might be interesting in terms of how you find your career is to ask Professor Spiegel how he found his career, and that might provide some lessons that you all can learn from. So, Professor Spiegel, if you can tell us a little bit more about how you found your career in finance.
Oh, it was a complete mistake. So when I started as an undergraduate, I wanted to be a paleontologist. Then I found out you had to take organic chemistry and pass it, and then that was the end of that. So then I was like, what am I going to do now? So I took sociology classes. Okay. And I thought, well, doing all right in this, maybe I'll go into law. My mother was a lawyer, and she was trying to talk me out of it. She gave me a book called 1L. I read that and said, I don't want to be a lawyer. So then I was completely lost. So I was taking random courses, and I stumbled into economics. And I thought, well, this is pretty easy. And I did well. So that's a great combination. So I kept taking econ courses. And then I wound up taking a course in industrial organization. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting, which was kind of unusual for me. I'm not a really, wasn't a very academically minded student in a lot of ways. So for me to find a topic that was interesting was kind of a surprise to me. So I kept taking them, and then I wanted to get a job over the summer, and I asked the faculty member who's teaching the class if I'd get a job with his firm. I'd done quite well in the course. And he said yes, and so I thought I was all lined up for the summer. Then there was a recession. This is way back in the early 80s, and my job disappeared before the summer started. So now I'm desperate. So he recommended me to a member of the econ faculty, said, well, why don't you see about hiring me as an RA? So I talked to the guy, and I was an undergraduate, and he didn't really have any interest in hiring an undergraduate RA. So I said, look, I'll make a deal with you. I'll work for nothing. And if you think what I'm doing is worthwhile, you can pay me. So about 3 weeks later, I got all my back pay plus hired for the next 2 years. So, that's how I wound up in economics. And then I went to graduate school in economics after that. And I did a dissertation I thought was in an industrial organization, but everybody in the world thought it was in finance. So in fact, no econ department offered me a job, but finance departments did. So then I wound up in finance just by complete accident because of that. And so here I am.
I think it's a great story because it shows several things. One is how a faculty member played a pivotal role in terms of getting you a job when you needed one, but also how you can end up in a career by accident. But that whole idea of finding what you like and what you do well is a very powerful combination.
Michael, I have a question for Josh.
Go ahead.
Similar. Josh, since you were a summer Bulldog last summer with Dr. Annie Harper and the Department of Psychiatry and the Yale School of Medicine, can you talk about how that experience led to your current position working with Professor N? Let me just abbreviate, where you are now. Because I think that's an important transition, how you were able to go from one experience and build another experience.
So that's a big part of at least how I view internships to be, as in they are an experience to try something out and see if it is the right fit for you. Because to me, psychology and the type of research that Dr. Harper is doing, it's really intellectually fascinating. As maybe this is something I want to do with my life. Maybe it's something I want to pursue as a career. So I did the internship, I tried it out, and I absolutely loved working with Dr. Harper. But by the end of the summer, I was fully convinced that psychology just is not the field for me. It's fascinating, but it's not something that I want to do for the rest of my life. So I turned to my other interests, namely biology. And I found a good fit with Dr. Nocturgale's lab, and that's led me to where I am now.
And how did you find that position? I think that's great advice for the students on the webinar.
So that one was pretty straightforward. I had Dr. Nocturgale as a professor for one of my classes, and I had one of the grad students in her lab as my TA. And I talked to them a bit about the research that they were doing in the lab, asked to come to a few lab meetings, and then afterwards asked if I could join the lab. And it was really as straightforward as just sitting down and having that conversation.
Wow, that's inspiring. Thank you.
Well, this is great. I'm glad you were able to take advantage of that opportunity and really orchestrate your own following summer. And that's the importance of these internships, is that they set you up to be more qualified for the thing that you do the following summer. So having this internship is going to be a very great experience for you, and it will help you either figure out what you want to do or figure out what you don't want to do. And that's okay if you don't want to do a particular field, because some people, you can save a lot of years by not going to the wrong field of work. Any other questions from the interns or any closing comments from our panelists? Abel?
I did not have a question, but I guess I'll just ask, well, how do you recommend like doing other things on the side to, like, I guess, just enjoy yourself, and like managing the work outside of work too, that might arise over the summer?
So a big thing with that is like set aside dedicated time for yourself. So for me, that looks like setting aside a couple hours each week to work out, time for cooking food, time to spend on the phone with friends and family, time to just get outside and get away from the things that I am doing so I can have that time to refresh and recuperate. And sleep is a very big part of that. Like it's probably the most important part of that. But sleep and good food will go a long way. But it's really just about like deliberately setting aside that time for yourself.
Thank you. And this is for Professor Spiegel or for Josh. Any closing comments before we close the evening out?
I don't have anything I can think of to add.
All right, Josh?
I mean, the biggest thing is just take the time to enjoy your internships, make the most of it, and try and have fun with it.
Josh, may I ask, what are you going to do this summer coming up? Because you're a junior, right? You're a junior?
So this summer, I'm working in Dr. Nocturgale's lab. I'm doing mRNA modification research on MALAT1. It's a long non-coding RNA that's misregulated in several different types of cancer. We know it's modified, and we know that RNA modifications can impact the regulation of RNA, but we don't know what those modifications are. We don't know what they do to MALAT1, and we don't really know what effects its misregulation might be having. So I'm trying to sort out all of those, which I recognize is a bit ambitious for just the summer, but got to start somewhere.
Wow.
Nobel Prize on the way.
Wow. Josh, let me ask you another question. Since you are a junior now and we met you last year, if you can take a look back when you were a first year student to where you are now, what advice would you give to current students who are on this call tonight?
Oh, the biggest thing is just take care of yourself. Like, I cannot overstate how important getting enough sleep, getting some good food, getting some exercise, and just setting aside time for your own personal well-being and mental health. Those are the most important things you can do for yourself. And they just make everything so much easier, be that academic, social life, or anything else you have going on.
Great advice.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening, and I'm hoping that you learned some great things in terms of preparing for this internship this summer. And thank you for the volunteers and for our panelists for spending their time this evening. And with that, I'd like to close the program and have a great evening.
Thank you.